Subscribe to get the news. Staying informed. Staying informed on the latest in politics is important, but with a busy schedule, it can be tough to find time for the news. That's where Top News in 10 comes in. This 10-minute podcast created by The Daily Signal is designed to quickly catch you up on the day's top stories. Released every weekday at 5 p.m., it's perfect for fitting into your busy life, whether during your commute, running errands, or cooking dinner. Each episode covers the 3 biggest news items of the day and offers a quick rundown of smaller stories in a fast-paced news flash. On weekends, when you have a bit more time, we dive deeper with an interview edition featuring lawmakers, conservative leaders, or policy experts discussing key issues. Subscribe to the Daily Signal podcast so you never miss a new episode of Top News in 10 or our weekend interviews.
Tony Kinnett.
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 Host of the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Let's get down to business.
You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYPC.
WCYTV.
Here on the Daily Signal.
Welcome to our wonderful, absolutely stellar coverage here of the Trump inauguration. Just a second. There we go. Video is all nice and clean. Good to be with you. I'm Tony Kinnett. We're here live from Washington, D.C. with a lot ready to go in this beautiful, fantastically frigid day. And may I just say, it certainly is cold. Many of us have been swimming, positively slushing through the snow and the ice. And for those out there that are possibly concerned just a little bit that the Trump inauguration was moved inside only because of possible security threats and things of that nature, we can confirm, at least at the present time, that it really is true that the weather is just atrocious. Of course, those of you that are in kind of our radio coverage areas know how frigid it absolutely is. And my goodness, boys, girls, squirrels, and everything in between. It is a cold one that has not stopped the attitude of this town. And may I just say that the attitude here in Washington, D.C. is something else entirely. In 2017, after Donald Trump was elected for the first time, what we saw was about 60%, 70% of the people here who were kind of quietly resigned and grumpy, both sides of the aisle. Donald Trump did not win that particular election as much as Hillary Clinton lost that election, flubbed it right at the finish line. Just an absolutely atrocious moment. Now take it back a little bit after the greatest political comeback of all time here in the United States, only rivaling that perhaps of Napoleon in Europe. There really is something different in the air this time. There is not even a quiet optimism, there is an open enthusiasm. And it's not just for Trump himself. The idea that often comes from perhaps the other side of the aisle really is built around this idea that Donald Trump is some kind of a cult of personality, and therefore, because he's a cult of personality, oh no, the horror, the terror, all this other kind of nonsense. Because the rumor for years has been that this was all just about who Trump was as a person, what you saw was really a lack of understanding from the left that played into how the mainstream media carried themselves into covering why Trump started to gain steam again when he got back into the presidential race here for 2024 and the snowball started rolling down the hill. And we're going to get to all of that today. We've got a lot of guests lined up, a lot of great things moving forward for you. But first, we got to get to a little bit of quick news roundup, because though I would love to just focus immediately on this particular inauguration right off the crack of the bat, I'm afraid that news never rests. And so, right off the top, Joe Biden, President of the United States, has issued a sweeping series of pardons here right before he walks out the door. And I do mean right before he walks out the door. Joe Biden this morning pardoned a couple of individuals in what has to be one of the greatest scandals in American presidential history. A couple of weeks ago on the show, I made the case that Joe Biden's presidency rivaled the corruption of Harding, the Teapot Dome scandal, in which Harding just appointed all of his buddies from various industries around the country to government-specific positions, and then started interfering with policy on behalf. And that was considered a major scandal back during the Harding administration. Biden's work with the Department of Justice, of course, had a couple of issues here and there that were certainly up to that level. But then Joe Biden came out and issued a blanket pardon for anything Hunter had done, and then also a blanket pardon for anything Hunter might do, and teased the idea that he was going to issue these blanket pardons for a number of individuals that were supposedly targeted by the Trump campaign. So I'm getting a little bit of a note from my producers that the glasses are just a bit too distracting. And I know those of you out there that are watching and not listening, you love how the glasses separate how I look a little bit from J.D. Vance. So you're just going to have the Indiana Vance for a little while. Let's talk a bit about what Biden did to completely flip the corruption angle of the last couple of weeks of his administration on its head, because this is wild. And I'm not at all being hyperbolic when I say that to issue a pardon is absolutely under the purview of presidential authority. To issue a pardon for crimes that haven't been charged, haven't been tried, haven't been convicted of is problematic. It was a problem when Ford did it for Nixon, not when Ford pardoned Nixon to restore the country by pardoning Nixon for crimes that were on the books, but for saying pardoning Nixon for any crimes over this period of time that he might have committed. That was going to cause a problem. That is not in the United States Constitution. That is not what it was set up to do. And I want to make this absolutely clear. When Ford made that decision and he framed the atrocities of a future ambiguous pardon in the way that it was phrased, it was going to cause decades of trouble for the United States. And now we see the full ramifications by Joe Biden, President of the United States, who, by the way, it is now just fully on the record. It's a bit incredulous. We'll get to Mike Johnson talking a little bit about how, all of a sudden, Biden may have been signing executive orders that even he didn't know what was on them. No one had any idea. That's something we'll get to in just a couple of minutes. But Joe Biden's pardoning of his son Hunter, and now, according to the list that came out this morning, Biden is pardoning General Mark A. Miley. You've got Dr. Anthony Fauci and all of the members of Congress and staff who served on the January 6th committee. Also, the U.S. Capitol and D.C. Metro police officers who testified before the Select Committee. What Joe Biden has done has pardoned a group of individuals who, at the time, there is no investigation into them. There is no indictments that have been made. There was no convictions that have been made, which means that at the time, that theoretically there are no crimes that these individuals have committed. Again, I'm saying theoretically because the justice system has not actually played out. In the United States, if you get indicted for something, as Donald Trump was over the last couple of years, then follows an investigation. There's a period of discovery where they go through the documents concerning your case, communication, emails, text messages, Hillary Clinton's bathroom server, and you look at the evidence put out in front of you, and the justice system is supposed to be carried out. And what you're supposed to see are a speedy trial that's outlined in the Constitution. If it's a civil trial, you're supposed to have lawyers argue about damages. You're supposed to argue what this means regarding the individual, what they meant, what they didn't mean, whether it was on purpose, whether it was accidental, the whole murder versus manslaughter kind of thing. Investigations are supposed to play out, right? You're supposed to get your fair due for a very wide range of things that one could be indicted for. But when a president at the end of his term in office can just magically wipe away any sins, future sins, past sins, whatever, by saying you're pardoned for just anything, anything at all. As Joe Biden said, specifically because Trump was talking about them, you have broken the executive branch. You've broken the executive branch because now, at the end of any presidential administration, if this is allowed to remain president, which it absolutely should not, the Supreme Court should take this up immediately, today. This is a constitutional crisis. It is a constitutional crisis because never in the constitutional outline of the presidential pardon, anywhere in the document, anywhere in the amendments, does it say that a president has the authority to pardon for any crimes in the mystical whatever that may or may not have been committed. Because what this presidential pardon implies is that they did commit these crimes and that they had to be pardoned because of it. We've seen a little bit of this kind of a constitutional crisis with presidents treating the last days and the first days of their administration as the executive order revolving door, in which the American legal system isn't a slow and steady gridlock kind of a back and forth in which Americans are given opportunities to get into a position where they can bring about effectual policy. But the presidential pardon back and forth now is going to be, you can really do whatever you want in an administration. If it's illegal, if it's legal, doesn't matter. If they're involved in the federal government, let your buddies just have a ball. And then your last day in office, you throw blanket pardons. And as Whoopi Goldberg said, he could pardon Bozo the Clown if he wanted. And then nobody can say a thing. And that is how the executive office becomes a despot totalitarian dictatorship, not through eternal ruling, but by protected corruption and lawbreaking. This is, in and of itself, the greatest present threat to the United States Constitution. The pardon authority of the president must be Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green Party, Constitutionalist, some magical other kind of party. Doesn't matter. Should be limited by being extremely detailed and specified. And then there's the issue of President Biden's mental state, which now all of the journalists and pollsters, all the way from writers over at the New York Times and the Washington Post, over to pollsters like Nate Silver, are trying to come out and say, you know, guys, I think that old Joseph R. Biden, I think old Joe Biden might not be all there. I think old Joe Biden, you know, actually may not have been running his administration. He may not even have been signing executive orders himself. Biden may have thought he was signing an executive order on immigration, and instead he was signing an executive order on environmental issues. That is, if we cannot discern whether or not the president of the United States signed executive orders that he knew he was signing, that he was just given things by staffers, and because he's a doddering old fool, accept those executive orders, that's a problem in and of itself. Number two, you have the individuals like those that, you know, that I have mentioned, that have made the bizarre decision. And by the way, it is truly a bizarre decision to tell the rest of us that we were crazy or that they were cheap fakes or deep fakes when the rest of the country clearly noticed that Joe Biden had mentally deteriorated. The lights were on, no one was home, Jell-O and pudding pops. And I'm not just talking about Bill Cosby. We are in the end of a serious, just a whole book full of scandals. You ever been in a situation like that? And I feel like a lot of Americans, they kind of get this sort of a feeling. Have you ever been told by your kid, if you're a parent, that something was wrong, maybe at school or something was wrong at home. And so you get home and you see the mess, and the mess wasn't just one mess, it was like 30 messes. And the kid's like, yeah, I broke this plate. And then you get home and the kitchen's 2 inches underwater. And also the refrigerator is somehow turned inside out. The dog is on the roof. That's currently what awaits the Trump administration. Not to mention the intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice, really the federal agency structure as a whole, has been run so independently of the executive office, which is another complete issue and mess in and of itself. When you dig into what this is going to cost the American people over the next century, I don't even know how we can begin to clean this up. I mean, it is truly one of the most bonkers ends to a presidential administration since Lincoln got shot in Ford's Theater. So that being at the top of the quick news roundup is something else, kind of a quick news roundup we haven't had in quite some time. So that brings us over to the hostage deal over with the Hamas terror organization and the Israeli Defense Force. So right now, what you are seeing is a number of hostages, I believe 3 so far, that have been released. And the photos, the videos of these are incredibly heartwarming to see hostages released after 15 months of captivity by human traffickers and rapists and the other individuals that Hamas, gives golden tickets to. And already we're starting to see issues developing because Hamas giving away hostages as far as they see, because terrorists a dime a dozen, whoever Israel actually releases back to Hamas, these 20-something-year-old, 18, 19-something-year-old guys of fighting age, at greater numbers than the hostages released from Hamas. It's really interesting to see Hamas already starting to get a little bit nervous. Already a little bit of mobilization, what we're starting to see from the first images coming in over from the Gaza Strip, where Hamas realizes very quickly that the more hostages that they give up, the more bargaining power, leverage, hostage holding ability that they have, meaning that when one of these Islamic fundamentalists finally gets around to, blowing things to kingdom come, as they so often do, then Israel will be, let's say, quite a bit more able, under a Trump administration specifically, to allow Israel to take out whatever they need to in the Middle East. And given the rapidly deteriorating size of Hamas and the complete absent structure, much less moral, legal, logistical, of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, you really could see a kind of a proxy domino effect in the Middle East over the next couple of months, much less the next couple of years, that could very well end with the toppling of the Iranian regime. So that takes that particular most lovely bit of quick news off of the roundup. Last and certainly not least, this is being updated kind of as we're moving forward. Trump is expected to sign an order ending birthright citizenship. There is a bit of a question constitutionally as to whether he'll be able to do this, because the way the amendments are set up in the United States Constitution, specifically the 14th Amendment, it's not entirely sure how Trump is going to phrase an executive order, which might bring about some kind of an end to birthright citizenship, in which individuals who came into the country illegally could have children here and then basically be given permanent access because their kid is here and their kid is an American citizen. We're going to be talking in just a minute with Ron Coleman, getting a little bit of perspective on some of the legal implications of just a massive ball of legal spaghetti in regarding the Constitution and in regarding to historical precedent, not to mention, and not even to mention, what we're going to have to tackle as far as the Biden regulatory administrative nonsense. We will be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast's inauguration coverage with the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC and all across our national partners. Good to be with you.
I'm Bradley Devlin, politics editor of the Daily Signal. I want to invite you to tune into my new show, The Signal Sit Down. For far too long, your political leaders have not represented you in Washington, D.C. Instead, they've chosen to represent themselves, their friends, and powerful interests. On The Signal Sit Down, we'll expose how the sausage really gets made in Washington, D.C. with guests who have experience on the inside. Past guests include Senator Ron Johnson, Congressman Andy Harris, Senator Rick Scott, and Congressman Riley Moore. So check out the Daily Signal's newest show, The Signal Sit Down, on YouTube, or listen to the audio version on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll see you there.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you. Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.
The best way for President-elect Donald Trump to drain the swamp is through legislation. The House of Representatives is back in session. Republicans in the House and Senate plan to achieve major reforms through a process known as reconciliation, which lets the Senate pass certain bills with fewer than 60 votes. Trump can do a great deal without Congress, but to make lasting change, he needs legislation. Congress should consider at least 3 reforms to make the federal bureaucracy more accountable to the people. First, legislators should consider banning public sector unions in the federal government. Even Franklin Delano Roosevelt opposed them. Why? Because of the perversity of official time. You see, bureaucrats often receive your tax dollars for hours they worked for the unions. Not only are these unions protecting bureaucrats from getting fired, but they're using your tax dollars to demand they get paid more of your tax dollars. Second, Congress should pass the REINS Act. Each year, agencies that Americans have barely even heard of issue more pages of regulations than Congress passes in bills. The REINS Act would require any major rule that would affect the economy to pass both houses of Congress. Finally, Congress should remove special privileges for federal agencies. The founders gave representatives the ultimate power over how much money agencies receive, but crafty progressives like Elizabeth Warren created agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, intentionally insulated from Congress. The CFPB gets its money through a complex funding system that is designed to protect it from congressional oversight. As I lay out in my book, The Woktopus, the dark money cabal manipulating the federal government, the bureaucracy's power enables a network of far-left activists to infiltrate and advise the federal government, getting their preferred policies implemented without Congress. Undermining this perverse system will require more than just executive orders, and these 3 legislative moves would help Trump get off to a running start.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's good to be with you. Good to be joined by Ron Coleman, and a fantastic lawyer, a brilliant legal mind. So obviously, we could go into a million different things. Everything from the Biden pardon situation and the legality of that, all the way over to the 14th Amendment issues, perhaps a little bit with Trump's expected executive order decision. We'll kind of start off with the basic question a lot of Americans are asking. How likely are some of these pardons for whatever, from the general over to Liz Cheney and Fauci, how are those going to be able to hold up any kind of scrutiny?
They're going to hold up to some degree of scrutiny. Different pardons need to be worded differently. They're going to be challenged. I think that's the most important thing we should understand. They're going to be challenged on the ground of their breadth and their vagueness. And although it is true that the few times courts have considered the question of how far pardons can go, they have agreed that the pardon power is flexible. There's obviously a limit.
Right.
If the president were to decide, I'm going to pardon everyone who's a Democrat, or I'm going to pardon everyone who's black, everyone who's white, I don't think anyone would argue that that would be far beyond what was contemplated by the pardon power in the Constitution. But where you would get that limit, how you would find that limit, absolutely uncharted territory.
So how do we start to chart that territory? Because, we can keep having these conversations as the, cultural norms of the United States political system continue to erode. We can absolutely do that. That's not, we've played that game before. But at some point, someone might want to fix the descending into the French Revolutionary style of government that our agencies seem to be moving towards. So how do you start?
Well, I think that President Trump has a pretty good idea of how he's going to start, that he's going to start today, and a lot of that is going to be with executive orders, but there's going to be litigation. And the Justice Department is going to be challenging the extent of the pardons. One thing that I've seen a few people say is that pardons do not prevent a party from being prosecuted. They prevent a party from being convicted.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that might be a little bit of a tendentious distinction, because if I have an absolute defense to being prosecuted, I can walk into court as soon as I'm indicted and make a motion for it to be dismissed on the ground that I can't be convicted. I don't know just how far that will go. No one does.
So I've heard at least. I just want to be very transparent here that this is one of the reasons that we're having you on is that a lot of these things just end in open-ended question marks for me, because we are in uncharted territory, and I'm not going to sit here and tell everyone that I know everything, because I may be stupid, but I'm not dumb, But if we actually want to start solving these issues, do you think that this is something that attorney generals at the state level? I mean, if federal crimes are able to be brought in the state of New York against Donald Trump, then theoretically could state prosecutions bring federal crime charges against Anthony Fauci?
No. What was done in New York and is still ongoing in New York, technically, he was sentenced for nothing.
Unicorn business nonsense.
They could be, Tony. It's right back to your French Revolutionary or Roman imperial system of justice.
Right.
And on the other hand, if you don't prosecute crimes because, I don't want to be seen as being involved in retribution, you are saying that terroristic abuse of the justice system is okay, as long as one party is prepared to put an end to it. And it's always the same party. So there has to be some serious reform. And one of the reasons we're here is because the Supreme Court has been so lazy and so elitist about not getting involved in issues that it, in its great wisdom, has believed below it.
So how do you get them to be less lazy? I mean, what, do you just like start handing out Monster energy drinks to the court before they start a proceeding? What do we need to do?
Well, actually, I heard a very good lecture from my friend Josh Blackman, law professor in Texas, and he pointed out that Congress can put a lot on the plate of the Supreme Court that's not on there now.
Okay.
And make things required to be considered by the Supreme Court, which it will then have to rule on. If it does that, I think that might be part of the path toward recovering normalcy.
Does
it's
normal?
Does normal? You don't know how to ask the question because you're running uphill on ice.
Hey, I mean, if we're going to run uphill on ice, then at least we better put on the right shoes for it. And this is one of the things this is why I want to have these conversations.
That's why they call me the shoe of justice.
The shoe. Well, let's frame this up then. I mean, if we're going to come to terms with the fact that we're running uphill and it's slick and it's ridiculous and it's awful and whatever, fill in the blank, then help me out. How do we take this and actually get involved? Because this is a long haul situation. Americans, we want short sprints to the finish. We want an executive order passed, a law passed, and then it's done. Never have to worry about it again. It doesn't work like that, especially when you're reforming centuries at this point of broken problems. How do you start preparing the average American for a marathon, not a sprint, in the legal sense? Because that's not something you can just stitch onto a campaign slogan,
Well, all right. I mean, to answer your question in the harshest possible way, the average American doesn't have to be prepared. The average American can get up and go to work and do his regular routine. This is only a concern for people who are obsessed with the news. And the news, as it has come to be defined since basically the mid-20th century, is politics.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, politics really doesn't affect hardly anyone's daily life, at least not this high level of politics. There's going to have to be a lot of things that are going to have to be clarified. One thing I can say is that the people around Donald Trump now are qualified to help him get clarified. But it's not, you're 100% right, Tony. It's a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. To the extent that the Supreme Court is involved, it's never a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing's going to be resolved until they're involved.
We're on with Ron Coleman, one of the legendary legal minds of our time, chiefly in sarcasm and continuing to be the shoe of justice. Okay, let's hit you with
that's a triple E, by the way.
Oh, there you go. So let's hit you with the other shoe here, George Bush notwithstanding. Tell us a little bit about the 14th Amendment, this executive order possibility that we're getting word of on ending birthright citizenship.
I don't know anything about that. I know what I read just like you. It's going to be I'm not exactly clear. I mean, what I understand is that this is another area of the law that is rather ambiguous constitutionally.
Boy, I sure do love everything being ambiguous. My, what a blast.
But Tony, here's something we have to understand. Really, really important point. If you want to ask me how to prepare Americans mentally, what we're going through, it's that it is impossible to write laws and much less to draft constitutions in ways that answer every question in advance.
Right.
And the reason what we're going through now hasn't been a feature of our entire life is because every political system except the most tyrannical
Yep.
is premised on trust and a mutual understanding of respect for norms, respect for institutions, and statesmanship. And we have seen those eroded in the reaction to Donald Trump over the last 12 years in essentially unprecedented ways. It began a little bit under Nixon. Nixon was railroaded to a large extent. It doesn't mean that he didn't cause any of his own problems, but that was JV compared to what they came up with for Donald Trump. Because of the capture of every institution, journalism, corporate America, Wall Street, the academia, the left really believed that they would be exempt from second guessing and from consequences for their actions. So here we are today. There has been no pushback, and a lot of that non-pushback has been from people who were duty-bound to push back. And unfortunately, many of these are people who, ironically, harken back to what I just said 5 minutes ago, which is that, well, there has to be trust, there has to be statesmanship. But guess what? It turns out there's no Howard Baker on the Democrat side, ever.
Right.
Ever. There's never that respectable Republican or that respectable Democrat who's going to just do the right thing. And that's why the system is falling apart.
I think that's precisely, that's the precise point that needs to be said, and that's the thing that needs to be heard. And that's why I'm glad you said it. I'm not going to say that I baited you into giving the stern father conversation we all needed to hear, but I am going to say that you hit the ball square across the plate. So, Ron Coleman, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thanks for dropping into our inauguration coverage and giving us a little bit of perspective.
Catch you later.
All right, we see down at the Capitol Arena, we've got the Capital One Arena. Individuals are filing in. We're getting closer and closer to the ceremony's beginnings. We've got some great things heading up very soon, and you're not going to want to miss any of those at all here at the Daily Signal. A few things to dig into up next. That would be what President Donald Trump will be bringing into the next couple of years. And there's a little bit of a conversation that kind of goes in and out between whether or not the first 18 months are going to be more focused on kind of executive order action and agency deregulation, or whether we're actually going to see Congress put forward a few kind of single line item bills that might be easier to put in a slim majority kind of situation. Right now, especially with the Department of Government Efficiency, with DOGE, what we're already seeing is the true purpose of this organization. See, a lot of people think that DOGE is going to come through and kind of be like Ron Swanson, you're going to go slash it, and going to cut the budget here, there, and everywhere. I don't think so. I don't think that's the purpose of DOGE. The purpose of the Department of Government Efficiency that we've seen so far with Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk is to be a magnifying glass. And I don't mean a magnifying glass as in it's supposed to be the detective agency. I mean the magnifying glass with the sun and the ants. And that right now, the way that Congress functions is a group of individuals who make a lot of backroom deals because they have ideas for what their constituents want. The other congressman has ideas for what their constituents want, not to mention the personal interests and the lobbyists. And they all get together behind closed doors and kind of slide things around. And so you have this big pork-infested mega omnibus bill. And what we are seeing through DOGE so far is the magnifying glass comes out as soon as the big whopper bill hits the floor. And the magnifying glass comes out and examines one particular part of the bill that is awful. And it focuses the heat of the sun, in this case, the American public via social media, unfettered because social media censorship is quickly eroding away as the winds are changing. Not to mention the chairman of the organizations that might have something to say, like the FCC, the SEC, not to mention the investigatory agencies of the federal government. Those winds are changing. And so if the American public sees what's going on and is given reason to believe that their congressman might have something to do with this, then you get congressional offices that are flooded with calls. We saw this during the continuing resolution fiasco in December. And all of a sudden, your local congressman, wherever they may be from the nth district of your state or commonwealth, is no longer just another congressman headed to D.C. with a party tag next to their name. Now they are an individual that might be primaried by someone who is willing to vote against what has been a tradition in Washington for quite a while. That in and of itself is going to create a brand new environment in Congress. Now, will the majority situation play into this over the next 18 months? Absolutely. You're not going to be able to pass every sweeping reform that you want, but are you going to see kind of the focusing influence of the Department of Government Efficiency with its meme name DOGE? Are you going to see a little more pressure, maybe if not compressing coal into a diamond, compressing coal into a little bit more useful carbon fiber, something that's just a little bit stronger, might be able to help us in this particular situation? Yes, I do believe so. And that is going to make all of the key difference in the world. So that brings us over to some of the greater expectations that we're going to be looking toward in the next couple of months. Because right off the bat, and before we bring on Kurt Schlichter over from townhall.com to give us a bit of the idea of kind of where Trump has come from, where he's going, now we really, really need to look at the targeting of kind of the federal court system, invoking little injunctions here, there, and everywhere to halt reversal of regulation, the institution of new regulations, the institution of executive orders, possibly Schedule F staffing, firing, and hiring. That's where things are going next. So if you're looking past today, past the inauguration of Donald Trump, where we are going from here, first and foremost, without a doubt at all, is wholly going to be centered on the remaining bureaucratic and part of the judicial systems in the federal government, as well as in some blue state governments, trying to throw up every flag on the play that they possibly can. Anything to halt what is coming down the pike. Now, the funny thing is, there is a good chance that the Supreme Court rules in the favor of Donald Trump in some of these expected injunctions. But I mean, if you have guys like Tom Homan who are able to conduct themselves according to U.S. statutory codes and be extremely articulate and explicit in the manner that he moves forward, for example, with the notice that Chicago may be one of the first cities to receive a sweep of immigration customs enforcement agents, you may not be able to just slap an injunction on there and stop Tom Homan in his tracks. And if the Trump administration is able to be quicker than the left, which, I mean, I tell you what, the number of times that the Republicans have actually been able to be quicker to something than the Democrats, you can count on one hand. And that is if you're, a paraplegic and you don't have hands. Republicans have never been faster than Democrats, ever, on anything at all. And if Tom Homan and other federal agency heads or czars or secretaries, assistant secretaries, deputy secretaries, assistant to the regional managers, I don't know, whatever these individuals are, if they're able to actually beat Democrats to the punch and carry out some operations or carry them out with a level of articulation, before we actually get some federal court judges in there throwing up little injunctions and, hey, wait a second, I'm a nonprofit who says there's this crying individual who really doesn't like X, then you might actually see a complete reframing of the United States norms over the next couple of months to something that might be more akin to mid to late 90s policy in the United States. That is unreal. And it's what we're looking at. And see, the big mistake that a lot of people are making when you're thinking about the next couple of months in the Trump administration, when you're looking at what people are expecting, the left, Trump's going to be dictator on day one. And by the way, that is day one, so happy Dictator Day, everyone. Yippee, I guess. So after Trump has us all goose-stepping to the Reichstag or whatever, and he, tomorrow rises and Trump is no longer a dictator, the left thinks that that's what we're heading towards. And then there are individuals on the right that think that, Trump's going to, lock up everyone from, Hillary Clinton to John Stamos. And I just hate to let everyone in, but it's just not going to be that full of a house. You see what I did there? Yeah, my producer gets it. So what does this mean? Well, first of all, I'm going to take a drink of my coffee that I've been passing back and forth between my hands for the last 30 seconds before someone opens up the studio door and chucks something at me. Are we getting ready for Project 2025? I sure hope so. But I'm afraid that that's not exactly how, on either side, kind of the visions for the next couple of months are going to pan out. What you are going to see is the game face on. Very unusual. So when Biden took office, you'll remember they trotted out Jen Psaki, and she was just so excited and bouncy, and yay, it's going to be a blast. And you had the Rachel Levine, drag his skirted behind up in front of the podium, and he was all excited. And Lloyd Austin, after he was done counting his Raytheon money, he was so excited. And then, Alejandro Mayorkas, he finished shining up his head, and he was so excited. Oh, they were going to do so much important unifying work. And then they didn't. Instead, the kingdoms broke apart into their selective factions because Biden was dead. And so then you didn't have another cabinet meeting for ages. And so Pete Buttigieg just played with his trains. And then we swapped out for Karine Jean-Pierre about halfway through. And she was historic and amazing because she was a woman of color and a lesbian. And we'd never had something like that. Oh, it's just amazing and incredible. All of that to the side. The Trump administration, the first time around, was an internal fiasco because you had a lot of individuals who were left over from the Obama administration who were these lifelong bureaucrats doing the same old thing, resisting the way that the administration had moved forward, and caused a massive amount of problems. A massive amount of problems. Just because they had always been there. They were the experts in the bureaucracy. And these experts were they'd put on a smile and they'd shake your hand. We work with these people all the time in any government position, all the way down to public schools. I'll never forget the first day that I was at Indianapolis Public Schools. I met a guy who actually, funnily enough, worked for the Obama administration. And he was such a nice guy. He'd read my work at Chalkboard Review and various education columns that I'd put together here, there, and everywhere. And he treated me very nice up front. And then on the inside, basically an HR investigation was filed into the fact that I was a conservative education writer not long after. Because I tweeted something about like rest in peace Rush Limbaugh, which is, obviously a very terrible, evil thing. So that was kind of the same thing that you got out of the first Trump administration with the bureaucrats that were left behind. This time around, that isn't happening. What you're seeing is kind of a chin down, nose to the grindstone, get work done. Now that's different from an administration because if the institutional press no longer has the foothold that it had, if the Associated Press, if the USA Today, Kinnett reporting teams around the country, if the MSNBCs and the CNNs and the Washington Post and the New York Times and the PolitiFact and the Reuters, if they, shouting questions at the press secretary, are just told, I don't care. I do not care at all what you have to say. This is what's going on, and if you don't like it, tough. And the country doesn't get up in arms about it because, the legacy media gets up in arms about it, then pretty soon that passing fad is kind of going to roll off. And if it rolls off and, well, all that's left at the very end of the day is a country that's, well, kind of the way that it has been by, maybe I should rephrase that. If at the end of the day, the sky doesn't fall, and that CNN, who has predicted the end of the world for the 815th time, the sky doesn't fall, and Trump's team doesn't invoke super dictatorial whatever on day one, and it's just like a Republican administration that's perhaps even a little bit quieter because they're focused on getting things done, you think that the country is going to hate that? You think that, after a couple of days of the Trump administration, it's going to be the same loud, noisy, insane, ultimate fist fight marathon that the first administration was? No. It's going to be a lot quieter. And if it is a lot quieter, if it's a lot quieter, then you can expect the midterms to be a lot different than the traditional midterm flip cycle. Because I don't believe that the evidence is there. And I'm going to ask Scott Rasmussen about this a little bit later when he joins us. I don't believe that if you give the American people some peace and quiet, you give them access to their money, and you stop taking so much of it for useless programs like piers sinking off the coast of Gaza, and you just let them be, no finishing to that sentence, you just let them be, and you start working on things like crime and inflation where you can and unleashing American energy, you get around to midterms. And again, it's not going to be an issue of, can we get Republicans out to vote? What do the Democrats have in response to that? Call in now and tell us, because I can't think of a thing that they have to the table. Do you know one of the trending stories is right now, heading into the inauguration? I know we have the feed of the Capital One Arena and people filing in from that. This is from the Presidential Inaugural Committee. Right now, one of the trending stories is that John Fetterman has showed up in a hoodie. The senator from Pennsylvania, the most moderate and like normal, at least as far as rhetoric is concerned, to the Democrats. That's the story. Not that, I guess, other than like, oh, Michelle didn't want to come and Pelosi isn't coming and like no one cares. It's just that John Fetterman showed up in a hoodie. That's like the Democrats' response they've got, other than when AOC gets up and does her best impression of a Yorkie having a stroke. Mazie Hirono asking out individuals in the Senate confirmation hearings and asking them about their sex lives. That's it? That's the strategy? What about the establishment GOP who's not a fan of Donald Trump? What do they have? Like what, the general tut-tutting from the fancy dinners? I mean, is that really the opposition here? What about internationally? All of the European leaders are already either bending down or bending over. They're either going to kneel or they're going to get spanked. I mean, at this point, really, what is it? NATO's already coughing up the money. Putin and Zelensky are both looking to Donald Trump to see what it is that he's going to do. Hamas is terrified that Trump is going to allow, quote, all hell to break loose, end quote, in the Middle East. And so they're scurrying around to do whatever deals they can to prolong the boot of Trump down on whatever. And you think that what's the great grand like hand against Donald Trump? What's the brave resistance to Trump this time around? What, Denmark? The Danish? The Danish couldn't even keep the Danish. Yes. I'm sure that the Danish are absolutely going to be able to keep Greenland. By the way, the last poll shows that 60 to 65% of people in Greenland would rather join the United States. The Panama Canal at this point is basically built on an infrastructure by the Chinese, which might as well be built out of duct tape and urinal cakes. So that's the opposition to Trump? That's it? Remember what it was supposed to be? It was going to be like Nikki Haley putting up a brave front about, I'm a strong woman and I wear heels on stage and I'm really impressive and incredible. I mean, again, even on the cultural side of things, I just do not see where it is that Donald Trump is supposed to meet a serious amount of resistance on the cultural level in this next administration. great case in point is because Donald Trump is moderated on a lot of issues, but also because he has really focused in on some serious culture issues that the left went absolutely bonkers. A case that I've made for a long time, and those of you that either know me or have met me or knew me before I did this show, I know it may not be as professional, Sean. I'm just kind of lean back a little bit. You know, if it looks terrible, you just like throw something at me through the soundproof window. Thanks, Caleb. All right, so I made the case that the reason the left was so just god awful at accomplishing an agenda over the long term is because they always moved 10 or 20 years too early. So on the LGBTQ stuff, or whether we're talking about the kind of socialist revision of the economy, whatever. No matter what buffet of left-leaning policies you come to, climate stuff with the EV mandate from Joe Biden, they always move 10 or 20 years too early before the country is really like behind whatever it is that is up for discussion. And so what they end up doing is pushing a lot of parties that normally wouldn't work together into working together. Case in point, right across the hall broadcasting right now is the Megyn Kelly show. Megyn Kelly, it's at one point, not a huge fan of Donald Trump. They had their backs and their fourths. And then the LGBTQ issue came for children. And I mean, it literally went after kids. So that if you didn't let dudes in dresses and lingerie, not just like, oh, he's wearing a ball gown, how elegant and drag related. Dudes walking in open lingerie with fake boobs to read to children. Like highly sexualized stuff. The equivalent would be like a dude wearing the Chippendales get up. I'm thinking into the Chris Farley sketch. Do you know the Saturday Night with Chris Farley and Chippendales thing? Walking into reading to children. It's just gross and weird. Like, why are you doing it? That looked bad. And so what you ended up seeing is Megyn Kelly, because of the transgender issue with children, not to mention the mutilation and the sterilization and the cancer-causing hormonal treatments and things like that, aside from that insane mess, just the outset of exposing children directly to sexual deviance as though it was some type of an important civil rights issue. That got Megyn Kelly a couple weeks before the election to come out and actively campaign for Donald Trump. And you got the right glued together with the center, and then you had Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. swinging in from the trees. I mean, it really is, in the next couple of years, I mean, I'm just looking for the situation in which Trump starts to hit a little of this opposition because I'm just not seeing it. I'm just not. And if I'm not seeing any kind of huge opposition, you know, I'm not seeing, you know, any kind of huge opposition level stuff, then, I mean, you know, I'm just not seeing how the left is going to be able to build some kind of an opposition past that. We're going to head away for a quick break. We're going to jump back in with Kurt Schlichter and bring in a little bit of the footage from the introduction of this inauguration ceremony, a little bit of footage from inside the Capitol Rotunda. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Daily Signal. I am Tony Kinnett of the Tony Kinnett Cast. We will be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett cast here on the Daily Signal. We're getting ready for the inauguration ceremony to begin. It is looking like it's shaping up to be just one heck of a ceremony. It looks like the Clintons have shown up. Obama, Barack said that I think he was going to show up. There's just a crew ready on what is a very blustery, windy day down at the U.S. Capitol. And we're looking at really quite the day ahead of us. And my goodness, what's going on at the moment down at the Capitol. A little bit of a musical performance, some really beautiful opera that's taking place. We're getting ready for it over here. Looking ahead to the next couple of Trump years are not as potent unless you reach back to the last couple of years, the kind of things that Donald Trump has gone through. You really do need to look at the entirety of this inauguration process, the beginning of the second Trump term through the last couple of years. And all of that starts with the end of the 2012 dinner in which Barack Obama had made some kind of a joke. And this joke that Obama had thrown out that, well, yeah, sure, maybe, Trump may say that I was, going to go down as the worst president in history, but at least I will be a president. And, individuals laughed here and there, Trump just kind of stared into the camera. And the end of the Obama administration draws near. Trump comes down the golden escalator and announces his candidacy for the presidency of the United States. And believing it was in the bag, Hillary Clinton ran a campaign, but all of the odds said no problem at all. Totally going to be easy, no problem, just, straight breeze. And, we get to the end of that particular election. Hillary does not choose to go to Wisconsin. Trump does. Hillary believes she has it in the bag, just kind of sits back, relaxes, no issues at all. And Donald Trump ends up winning the presidency because Hillary Clinton completely drops the football. And over the next couple of years, Trump ends up being not a bad president at all. In fact, he makes some major strides in the Middle East. He does a lot of great things for the economy, the Trump tax cuts. He unleashes American energy in a lot of ways, and he begins the process of reforming the immigration system through things like stay in Mexico. And then COVID-19 hits. And it's a rough thing for any administration to go through. And Biden runs a basement campaign. Individuals from the federal government collude with the New York Post, collude with members of X and Facebook to hide a particular story about Hunter Biden's laptop from the New York Post that had done the reporting. Sorry, I had to get that all framed out specifically. And the lack of information to the general public, coupled with a bit of rather disturbing information, became a touchstone of corruption for this country. And it was at that moment that I do truly believe that if Donald Trump had kind of given it up and walked away, then I'm not entirely sure where, at least as a country, where the country would be at the end of the Biden administration. Because if the federal government can truly collude with other organizations in order to obscure stories about the president's family right before an election, then, I mean, realistically, every election from that point is free game. And so Donald Trump, over the next 4 years, fought uphill. And he fought uphill in a number of ways and environments. But none were more unbelievable to the American public than the indictments and the assassination attempts. We're going to hop away for a quick second. We're getting connected with Kurt Schlichter and then Scott Rasmussen afterward. Stick around. We'll be back in just a second here. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Because I'm a
Welcome.
player.
That's right. And that's just the perfect thing to bring you back in on. I in fact, I want you to know that all of our audience has heard confirmation that Kurt Schlichter is indeed a player.
You guys need to hate the game, but
all
not
right.
me. Hold on, I'm gonna be subtle. Like, I want to get my stuff squared away. There we are. There
Kurt
we are.
Schlichter.
So buy my products.
Oh yeah. You know what? We'll even update the Chiron so that it actually has your name here. I know
Nice.
that particularly excites you.
Oh, I like it. I'm gonna throw this. I've got like the worst jack in the world here,
Well,
and
Kurt,
it's great because it shows up really well on TV, but it looks if I were to wear it in public, people would mock me.
well, that off to the side. Kurt Schlichter from townhall.com. Good to have you. Trial lawyer, brilliant author. And by the way, one of the guys who understands, as someone who is not just a Trump fanboy for the sake of, it's like, I love Donald Trump, everything about him, but understanding still that Donald Trump was persecuted politically and being able to articulate kind of what that means to the American people. Do you get the distinction I'm making, or am I mulching that in the lawnmower?
No, I think you've got it right. I think, look, the establishment did everything it could to make Donald Trump not succeed, which really meant make a huge part of America not succeed and to keep their own power. And they completely failed. They've not only failed to keep Donald Trump out, Donald Trump has come back stronger than ever, and they completely discredited themselves. It's beautiful. It's glorious. I'm loving it.
I mean, absolutely. And this is this is really the key moment here, is that all of the indictments that they brought forward, all of those indictments, they were not able through all of those indictments to nail him on any of the things that they literally had people running for office for. Fannie Willis in Georgia ran for office for the sake of going after Trump. And you saw the same things in New York. You saw Jack Smith being appointed unconstitutionally to this super duper special prosecutor role. And the best they got Trump on were some like weird, strange alley-oop business things. It didn't get him down.
Which will all go away because they're a joke. No, here's the thing. our establishment is utterly incapable of actually performing any tasks. I'm a Californian, so I know from experience. When it comes to actually doing something, they can't actually do it. They're fairly good at getting power, not so great at keeping it, but they can't do the basic things or even the not basic things that they need to do. They're just bad at stuff. But they have this endless self-regard. This is hysterical. We're the experts. We're the best. Why aren't you listening to us? Give up state because of the weather. That kind of stuff.
So that brings us over to the assassination attempt. It's wild that we have to break down the entire Trump 4 years here in a couple of minutes. But then you get to the assassination attempts. The first one, obviously, where he took a bullet through the ear and turning his head just to the side in the last second. I was driving over, actually getting ready to head up to the Republican National Convention when that occurred. Do you think that was the moment when everything changed, or it was already heading in that direction and that cemented it into place?
I think it's cemented into place. I think it is. Look, they couldn't even manage to murder the guy. I mean, look, they're just bad at things, and I'm just so happy that they're just going away. They're just going to be gone, and we're going to run rampant. And the beauty of it is, I think Trump has learned some important lessons. Unlike them, Trump's able to learn. They forget nothing but learn nothing. Trump forgets nothing, but he's also learned a few things. I think he needs to vigorously use his power to support him and his supporters. And those are the new rules. If they want to have go back to the old rules, that requires A, that they suffer. That is, we cause them pain, and B, that they admit their wrongdoing and unreservedly beg to surrender. And then maybe.
I think that you're right on point there. Unfortunately, I think we have to kind of cut you short for just a very short segment because I believe J.D. Vance is in the middle walking up. Trump has just entered the room. So we're going to have to head over to Scott Rasmussen very quickly and then get the feed switched over to the live stream. So thanks for the quick bits, and we'll have you on to laugh at everything pretty soon anyway.
All right. Thanks a lot, man.
Take care.
Bye.
We'll be back in just a second with Scott Rasmussen. We're working on getting that live stream feed up for you. As you can see, the camera feed that we currently have is not the one from the Rotunda. We're working on getting that in touch for you. We'll be back with Scott Rasmussen in just a second. Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. We are getting ready for the ceremony itself to get to President-elect Donald Trump. But first, we're going to talk a little bit with Scott Rasmussen, the legendary pollster, who, by the way, congratulations on the amount of right that y'all were in the past election. It's good to have you.
Great to be with you, and exciting day.
So there's one key question that I've been looking forward to asking you for a couple of weeks. What do you believe, from all of your polling data, is the moment in the Biden-Trump race and then the Harris-Trump race that flipped the moderate Republicans into coming out for Trump and the moderate Democrats kind of into staying home more than usual?
Well, there were a couple of key points. Number one, especially for some of those Democrats, was the very first debate. There was this effort to convince everybody that Joe Biden was just fine, and that debate just burst that bubble. And then in terms of the Republican side of it, the first assassination attempt was really a defining moment in the race. As the race went on, what we saw was Donald Trump was favored. But the key thing that really helped win a couple of one particular Senate seat and make a couple others closest was that transgender issue, boys playing in girls' sports.
Right.
And that's one of the three things I think that people are looking for the Trump administration to fix. And the president's already talking about executive orders on that later today.
So let's dig into what you see that doing to the polling in the future. Do you think that if Donald Trump manages to get through a few of his promises, so we're not talking about everything in the kitchen sink, but he actually manages to get through a few of the promises that are biggest to the American people, do you think that this has enough weight behind it to beat the classic midterm flip that we've seen?
Well, there's three key issues. I just mentioned one, the gender identity craziness.
Right.
Second is border security. Very, very important. And again, the president is dealing with that with some executive orders later today. So if he solves those two, that's a really good start. In terms of beating that midterm curse, the economy is always the most important issue. What we saw in the last couple of years is that Main Street Americans were feeling very antsy about the economy. The Biden officials, the elites were saying, you guys just don't understand how good it is. Well, that helped get Donald Trump elected, but now the economy has to work on Main Street.
And if you think of the economy, if he's able to deliver on immigration and he's able to deliver on kind of the social issues, but right, the economy lags a little bit behind, do you see that really negatively impacting him as we boil down to the midterms? I mean, he has 18 months here, and the economy often doesn't move as fast as perhaps he, as an individual is looking for.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the key question. If he delivers on those first two and the economy is making little bits of progress, the Republicans will almost certainly hold the Senate in the midterms, again, assuming those things go right. The House is a much dicier proposition, and it will have to require some change. Now, one of the things that we noted, we do a lot of surveys where we compare the views of Main Street to various elite groups. With the election of Donald Trump, overall economic confidence went up a little bit. But when you dig into the numbers, they went up a lot on Main Street. And among the elites, confidence in the economy went down a little bit. I think for President Trump, it's those Main Street numbers that matter. They have to be much better a year from today to help keep the House.
Okay, so if we're looking at keeping the House effectively, then you think that we actually need like a level of deliverance that kind of directly is felt kind of by the pocketbook of the average American?
Yes. The question that we think is always the most important politically is not about the economy or anything else. It is, are your own personal finances getting better or worse? It's the trend. And right now, most people think they're still getting worse. They're a little less pessimistic than they were a few months ago. But if that number begins to move, if people feel better about their own finances, that will have an impact.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us, by the way. I know that when you're looking at polling data, especially after 2020, when people feel like the polls kind of got everything wrong and there's a very weird standard. Do you think other pollsters are starting to catch up to the modeling? Did you change anything between 20 and 24? I'm not asking you to reveal the secret sauce.
No, I think actually I would say first off, the polls in 2024 were pretty good overall. The Real Clear Politics average showed it would be a toss-up in the popular vote. That was just off by 1.5 points. There were no surprises. The swing states did all break in one direction. I think that we make a mistake, especially conservatives make a mistake when they talk about polling as if the problem is the numbers are too heavily weighted one way or the other. The biggest problem is when you look at polling questions. Axios has a poll out today saying Donald Trump's ideas to deport illegal immigrants are unpopular. That's because they picked a couple of provisions that are unpopular. But we went out and asked about the Lake and Riley Act. We asked about requiring verification that all employees are legal residents, all kinds of remain in Mexico policy. They're very popular. It's just Axios chose not to ask about those. So that's where the real problem comes, is in the questions that are asked once you get beyond Election Day.
Excellent. That really is kind of the key question, is if you have issues that Americans are looking forward to getting solved and there's broad base for it, I would like to say that it's kind of difficult to screw up that kind of polling, but where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, and I think, it's a little bit of, when you talk about those broad attitudes, that's what you want to focus on. Look, I guarantee you that the Trump administration, as they go through their deportation efforts, at some point will overreach and will perhaps go a little further than people are comfortable with. But that's after they've already accomplished a lot of good things. It's also after they've secured the border overall. A legendary pollster named Joe Napolitan, he worked for John Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. He said you should never underestimate the intelligence of the American people, but you should never overestimate their level of political knowledge.
Right.
And I think most pollsters do the opposite. I hate to say this, but most pollsters, especially in Washington, tend to think people are stupid, and they tend to think we all live and breathe politics, and both of those assumptions are wrong.
I think that's really right on the nose. So just kind of as a close here, because we are getting ready, the dignitaries have been seated. Everyone from the Clintons to the Bidens, it actually kind of looks at the moment like Joe is asleep, at least from the feed that we've got. And I'm not joking.
Right.
It's a little awkward there. Just kind of moving forward through this inauguration day. You have a wide bet on how many executive orders we actually see by the end of the day?
Oh, I think it's going to be close to 100. I think they've been preparing them in advance. I think the big story there is Donald Trump got really lucky that he lost in 2020 because he was facing a resistance. He didn't really know how to deal with it. He's had 4 years to reflect. He's had 4 years to build a team, 4 years to get these executive orders ready. And I don't think the swamp is ready for what's about to hit them because he's had that time to really think about and how to make the America First agenda happen. So it's going to be a wild week and then a wild couple of years.
Absolutely. Scott Rasmussen, the Rasmussen polling is an institution in and of itself. And thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you.
We are going to be back in just a minute. We have got a few things left to get ready on our end over on the stream for the inauguration. We'll be back in just a second. We'll get to the ceremonies and then a little bit of color commentary afterward. I'm Tony Kinnett. Thank you for sticking with us. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here for our inaugural coverage in Washington, D.C.
done for this nation. Thank you for the protection, the bounty, the freedoms that we so enjoy. We remember to keep our eyes fixed on you, and may our hearts be inclined to your voice. We know that America can never be great again if we turn our backs on you. We ask for your help, and we pray all of this in the name of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, your Son, my Savior, and our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Associate Justice Kavanaugh to administer the Vice Presidential Oath of Office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
I, James David Vance, do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
That I will bear true faith.
And allegiance to the same.
And allegiance to the same.
That I take this obligation freely.
That I take this obligation freely.
Without any mental reservation.
Without any mental reservation.
Or purpose of evasion.
Or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
The duties of the office.
The duties of the office.
On which I am about to enter.
On which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Vice President.
Welcome Chief Justice Roberts to administer the Presidential Oath of Office.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you the 45th and the 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Thank you very much, everybody. Well, thank you very, very much. Vice President Vance, Speaker Johnson, Senator Thune, Chief Justice Roberts, Justices of the United States Supreme Court, President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and my fellow citizens. The golden age of America begins right now. From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before. I return to the presidency confident and optimistic that we are at the start of a thrilling new era of national success. A tide of change is sweeping the country, sunlight is pouring over the entire world, and America has the chance to seize this opportunity like never before. But first, we must be honest about the challenges we face. While they are plentiful, they will be annihilated by this great momentum that the world is now witnessing in the United States of America. As we gather today, our government confronts a crisis of trust. For many years, a radical and corrupt establishment has extracted power and wealth from our citizens while the pillars of our society lay broken and seemingly in complete disrepair. We now have a government that cannot manage even a simple crisis at home, while at the same time stumbling into a continuing catalog of catastrophic events abroad. It fails to protect our magnificent, law-abiding American citizens, but provides sanctuary and protection for dangerous criminals, many from prisons and mental institutions that have illegally entered our country from all over the world. We have a government that has given unlimited funding to the defense of foreign borders, but refuses to defend American borders or, more importantly, its own people. Our country can no longer deliver basic services in times of emergency, as recently shown by the wonderful people of North Carolina, been treated so badly. And other states who are still suffering from a hurricane that took place many months ago. Or more recently, Los Angeles, where we're watching fires still tragically burn. from weeks ago without even a token of defense. They're raging through the houses and communities, even affecting some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in our country, some of whom are sitting here right now. They don't have a home any longer. That's interesting. But we can't let this happen. Everyone is unable to do anything about it. That's going to change. We have a public health system that does not deliver in times of disaster, yet more money is spent on it than any country anywhere in the world. And we have an education system that teaches our children to be ashamed of themselves in many cases, to hate our country despite the love that we try so desperately to provide to them. All of this will change starting today, and it will change very quickly. My recent election is a mandate to completely and totally reverse a horrible betrayal and all of these many betrayals that have taken place, and to give the people back their faith, their wealth, their democracy, and indeed their freedom. From this moment on, America's decline is over. Our liberties and our nation's glorious destiny will no longer be denied, and we will immediately restore the integrity, competency, and loyalty of America's government. Over the past 8 years, I have been tested and challenged more than any president in our 250-year history, and I've learned a lot along the way. The journey to reclaim our republic has not been an easy one, that I can tell you. Those who wish to stop our cause have tried to take my freedom and indeed to take my life. Just a few months ago in a beautiful Pennsylvania field, an assassin's bullet ripped through my ear. But I felt then, and believe even more so now, that my life was saved for a reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much. That is why each day under our administration of American patriots, we will be working to meet every crisis with dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring dignity and power and strength. We will move with purpose and speed to bring religion, color, and January 20th, 2025 is Liberation Day. It is my hope that our recent presidential election will be remembered as the greatest and most consequential election in the history of our country. As our victory showed, the entire nation is rapidly unifying behind our agenda with dramatic increases in support from virtually every element of our society, young and old, men and women, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, urban, suburban, rural, and very importantly, we had a powerful win in all 7 swing states, and the popular vote, we won by millions of people. To the Black and Hispanic communities, I want to thank you for the tremendous outpouring of love and trust that you have shown me with your vote. We set records, and I will not forget it. I've heard your voices in the campaign, and I look forward to working with you in the years to come. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. Thank you. Thank you. National unity is now returning to America, and confidence and pride is soaring like never before. In everything we do, my administration will be inspired by a strong pursuit of excellence and unrelenting success. We will not forget our country. We will not forget our Constitution, and we will not forget our God. Can't do that. Today, I will sign a series of historic executive orders. With these actions, we will begin the complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense. It's all about common sense. First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country. Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. And by invoking the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks, bringing devastating crime to U.S. soil, including our cities and inner cities. As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do. We will do it at a level that nobody's ever seen before. Next, I will direct all members of my cabinet to marshal the vast powers at their disposal to defeat what was record inflation and rapidly bring down costs and prices. The inflation crisis was caused by massive overspending and escalating energy prices, and that is why today I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill. America will be a manufacturing nation once again, and we have something that no other manufacturing nation will ever have, the largest amount of oil and gas of any country on earth, and we are going to use it. We will bring prices down, fill our strategic reserves up again, right to the top, and export American energy all over the world. We will be a rich nation again, and it is that liquid gold under our feet that will help to do it. With my actions today, we will end the Green New Deal and we will revoke the electric vehicle mandate, saving our auto industry and keeping my sacred pledge to our great American auto workers. In other words, you'll be able to buy the car of your choice. We will build automobiles in America again at a rate that nobody could have dreamt possible just a few years ago. And thank you to the auto workers of our nation for your inspiring vote of confidence. We did tremendously with their vote. I will immediately begin the overhaul of our trade system to protect American workers and families. Instead of taxing our citizens to enrich other countries, we will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. For this purpose, we are establishing the External Revenue Service to collect all tariffs, duties, and revenues. It will be massive amounts of money pouring into our treasury, coming from foreign sources. The American dream will soon be back and thriving like never before to restore competence and effectiveness to our federal government. My administration will establish the brand new Department of Government Efficiency. After years and years of illegal and unconstitutional federal efforts to restrict free expression, I will also sign an executive order to immediately stop all government censorship and bring back free speech to America. Never again will the immense power of the state be weaponized to persecute political opponents, something I know something about. We will not allow that to happen. It will not happen again. Under my leadership, we will restore fair, equal, and impartial justice under the constitutional rule of law. And we are going to bring law and order back to our cities. This week, I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based. As of today, it will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female. This week, I will reinstate any service members who were unjustly expelled from our military for objecting to the COVID vaccine mandate with full back pay. And I will sign an order to stop our warriors from being subjected to radical political theories and social experiments while on duty. It's going to end immediately. Our armed forces will be freed to focus on their sole mission, defeating America's enemies. Like in 2017, we will again build the strongest military the world has ever seen. We will measure our success not only by the battles we win, but also by the wars that we end, and perhaps most importantly, the wars we never get into. My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier. I'm pleased to say that as of yesterday, one day before I assumed office, the hostages in the Middle East are coming back home to their families. Thank you. America will reclaim its rightful place as the greatest, most powerful, most respected nation on earth, inspiring the awe and admiration of the entire world. A short time from now, we are going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America, and we will restore the name of a great president, William McKinley, to Mount McKinley, where it should be and where it belongs. President McKinley made our country very rich through tariffs and through talent. He was a natural businessman and gave Teddy Roosevelt the money for many of the great things he did, including the Panama Canal, which has foolishly been given to the country of Panama after the United States. The United States, I mean, think of this, spent more money than ever spent on a project before and lost 38,000 lives in the building of the Panama Canal. We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back. Above all, my message to Americans today is that it is time for us to once again act with courage, vigor, and the vitality of history's greatest civilization. So as we liberate our nation, we will lead it to new heights of victory and success. We will not be deterred. Together we will end the chronic disease epidemic and keep our children safe, healthy, and disease-free. The United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. Ambition is the lifeblood of a great nation, and right now our nation is more ambitious than any other. There's no nation like our nation. Americans are explorers, builders, innovators, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. The spirit of the frontier is written into our hearts. The call of the next great adventure resounds from within our souls. Our American ancestors turned a small group of colonies on the edge of a vast continent into a mighty republic of the most extraordinary citizens on earth. No one comes close. Americans pushed thousands of miles through a rugged land of untamed wilderness. They crossed deserts, scaled mountains, braved untold dangers, won the Wild West, ended slavery, rescued millions from tyranny, lifted billions from poverty, harnessed electricity, split the atom, launched mankind into the heavens, and put the universe of human knowledge into the palm of the human hand. If we work together, there is nothing we cannot do and no dream we cannot achieve. Many people thought it was impossible for me to stage such a historic political comeback. But as you see today, here I am. The American people have spoken. I stand before you now as proof that you should never believe that something is impossible to do. In America, the impossible is what we do best. From New York to Los Angeles, from Philadelphia to Phoenix, from Chicago to Miami, from Houston to right here in Washington, D.C., our country was forged and built by the generations of patriots who gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. They were farmers and soldiers, cowboys and factory workers, steel workers and coal miners, police officers and pioneers who pushed onward, marched forward, and let no obstacle defeat their spirit or their pride. Together they laid down the railroads, raised up the skyscrapers, built great highways, won 2 world wars, defeated fascism and communism, and triumphed over every single challenge that they faced. After all we have been through together, we stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in American history. With your help, we will restore America, promise, and we will rebuild the nation that we love, and we love it so much. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. So to every parent who dreams for their child, and every child who dreams for their future, I am with you, I will fight for you, and I will win for you. We are going to win like never before. Thank you. Thank you. In recent years, our nation has suffered greatly, but we are going to bring it back and make it great again, greater than ever before. We will be a nation like no other, full of compassion, courage, and exceptionalism. Our power will stop all wars and bring a new spirit of unity to a world that has been angry, violent, and totally unpredictable. America will be respected again and admired again, including by people of religion, faith, and goodwill. We will be prosperous. We will be proud. We will be strong, and we will win like never before. We will not be conquered. We will not be intimidated. We will not be broken, and we will not fail. From this day on, the United States of America will be a free, sovereign, and independent nation. We will stand bravely. We will live proudly. We will dream boldly, and nothing will stand in our way because we are Americans. The future is ours, and our golden age has just begun. Thank you. God bless America. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, performing America the Beautiful, please welcome the Armed Forces Chorus.
That was President Donald J. Trump, now the 47th President of the United States. And, wow, they make a lot of presidential speeches. You know, there are a couple of, man, just as a communications, from a point of communications, the list of American jobs, the list of cultural points throughout history, a president who actually, again, I don't care whether he memorized it. I don't care whether he read it off the teleprompter. The clear distinction of a president who actually knows where his thoughts are. Oh, we're so back. And right in the faces of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden behind him, who's nodding off back and forth. The Geritol's wearing off. Come on, it's over. Or Jover. Now, funnily enough, as we were getting ready to cross over to the actual coverage itself of Trump's inauguration, wouldn't you know it, just as Scott Rasmussen said, I sure hope we don't have anybody get pardoned over the next 5 or 6 minutes. Joe Biden pardoned all of his immediate family right before he left office. Blanket pardon from 2014 onwards. Now, you out there might have one question. Hey, Joe, what happened in 2014 that you need to issue a blanket pardon for Hunter, your brothers, sisters, kids, relatives, cousins, cousin Leroy from down at the Speedway? What happened in 2014? What kind of influence peddling scheme could you have possibly been implicated? So he's sitting there thinking he's all smug. Kamala Harris, of course, is sitting there, possibly drunk, possibly not. Doug Emhoff is sitting there currently trying to break his record of not smacking a woman. And then you've got other dignitaries that are seated around, Hillary Clinton and Bill, trying to, not remember the good times with Jeffrey Epstein. And then you have Donald Trump, who gets up in front of the entire country and says, first things first, emergency at the border. And I know that Biden may have been selling off pieces of the border wall for $5, which is a gross misuse of taxpayer money, and quite honestly, a form of fraud. But even better, that Donald Trump says, we're not screwing around this time. Emergency order now, and the military is going to get the wall built because the Mexican drug cartels are here. They are killing Americans of every color, of every creed, men, women, and children. And then he declares a national emergency on energy. And by declaring a national emergency on energy, Trump makes it very clear that President Biden's little, special moments of national parks of nowhere in California, like creating a national park in the middle of the Sahara Desert, means absolutely nothing. Now, Trump, by saying we have a national energy crisis, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is thirstier than a girl with an OnlyFans. I mean, maybe we actually start to refill it. Just kind of a concept, kind of an idea. Maybe also the government stops treating people as though they are special because of their genitals or what genitals they identify with, or because of a skin color or some magical community they may or may not be a part of. I say may not because, good old Elizabeth Chief Warren and her Lucky Charms certification of Native Americanship. So Trump then dives into an elaborately constructed articulation of why America is an amazing country. And I'll tell you what, Caleb, I'm actually really thrilled because there was one thing that I saw in his re-announcement that he was going to run for election in 24. So this is back in, 21, 22. He gets out in front of the country at Mar-a-Lago and he lists all of these things that he wants to do. And I'll be honest with you, I was nodding along and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, that's great. I agree with you. You're being prosecuted. I hear you. And then he stops looking back and he starts looking forward. And he starts looking forward for the entire country. By what I mean is he paints a vision. And he said, we are going to be the first country to plant a flag on Mars. And I actually remember bothering and producer Daniel over in the live stream chat over on X. I know that he can verify that I think I messaged the Chalkboard Review guys at the time and said, hands down, one of the biggest things that Trump has ever done is saying, we as a country, we're going to Mars. Because that's JFK level visionary. That's Teddy Rooseveltian visionary. That's something new. That's something that when you make an economic policy, when you make a security policy, when you make international foreign policy, whether we're talking tariffs, whether we're talking taxes, whether we're talking remediation, diplomacy, whatever, you have a vision that you're working toward. And if I have a vision in my head, I am going to remodel this part of the bathroom. I am going to put myself through several layers of pain in buying things and setting things up and then doing the labor in order to accomplish that goal that I have set up, which is very foolishly trying to remodel the bathroom in like a day and then screaming special words at the electrical sockets later that evening. That's a different story for a different time. When Trump got up in front of the Mar-a-Lago crowd and said, we're going to Mars, I said, something's different. And I'm not, I do not have a red MAGA hat, although I will be purchasing one by the time I leave Washington, D.C. Absolutely. Number two, when Trump cast a vision forwards, I remember thinking in advance for today, I hope he brings back Mars. I hope he brings up the vision. Show me that when you painted a vision ahead of time, show me that there actually is something to move towards and that it wasn't just something that you said at the beginning of the campaign. You've won the election. You don't have anything to prove to anybody anymore. You're upset at the corruption. You're upset at those who went after you. You're tired of the gender nonsense and the racial nonsense. You're tired of the non-meritocratic form of government. You're tired of the corruption. You're tired of the goofy-footed Obama dotted red line foreign policy. We all are. Everything from inflation to real estate regulations to medical malpractice and not allowing us to buy prescriptions like everybody else does. So I have to go to Eli Lilly with my $3 in a bowl full of gruel. Yeah, I agree with you. You're tired of that. But then he got to Mars. And he said, this is where we're going to go as a country. That's not renaming the Gulf of Mexico. That's something different. Because I'll tell you what, with Elon Musk doing what he does with rockets, and I know the Daily Wire crew has talked about this. I think either Ben or Michael Knowles have chatted about this, that Elon Musk has reduced the amount of money it takes to send poundage into space. So back in the day, it was like several grand for every pound that you wanted to send into space. Now, with Elon Musk's reusable rocket technology and the giant chopsticks catching things out of midair, it's a couple bucks per pound. That changes the game. You want to go to Mars, that changes the entire game because you can start creating systems for redundancy of oxygen scrubbing, carbon dioxide scrubbing, oxygen replenishment, as well as the long-term food and exercise needs. You can create goals and then you can chase down those goals. Now, notice that very little of that actually has to do with Trump as a person. I'm not saying that Trump is some kind of a superhuman genius and he's playing, 4D chess while the rest of us are playing Candyland. No. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that what the country needs right now is a vision. What we got was Grandpa Joe coming in and going, what we need is unity. Now all of you, prison. But not my family. My family, I still cannot get over that today, Joseph R. Biden actually made the statement, I believe in the rule of law, but, excuse me? And then Trump gets up and says, no political prosecutions. And we're not going to judge people based on immutable characteristics. We're going to go back to merit. And then he lists a bunch of places. Now, I don't know if you were paying attention, but a lot of the places that he mentioned are blue cities. When I was actually, Tim Kennedy, our videographer, brilliant man on the street interviewer, he's just one of the best guys that we have over here at the Daily Signal. He and I went, and those who watch the show or listen to the show regularly, you know that I've talked about this trip more than any other. And I was actually telling Kate, my editor-in-chief, a couple of minutes ago during the speech, one of the greatest trips I think I've ever made with the Daily Signal was not to Maui, although that was an incredible experience, and we got to expose some corruption. It hasn't been coming to D.C. Sorry. There are a lot of places. Philadelphia was all right. And getting to look into parental rights in Philadelphia was cool. But the trip that made the biggest impact to me was going to Detroit. And we went to Clinton Township, north of Detroit, Michigan, to see to get a look at this UAW picket line. And I met Blue Dog Democrats. I don't mean Blue Dog Democrats like some suburban mom who I just really care about saving the whales. And Kamala's gonna do that. No. I'm talking old blue dog, yeah, I vote for the union. Yeah, I'll break your kneecaps. You come to my polling place trying to vote Republican. I'm talking the union Democrats. And this grizzled, that was how she said I could describe her. This grizzled, old black lady who had been on the line at the Ford Assembly Plant north of Detroit. For 30 years, that woman has been working on those assembly lines. She grizzled her hand like this, the index finger pointed back a little bit, and she jabbed me in the chest. Not to be mean, but she said, I want to be clear. She says, I don't really care for Trump. I think he's a bleep hole. I don't, whatever. But I tell you what, and that I tell you what, I mean, forget the hang kill. I tell you what. I mean, this one had some conviction behind it. She said, I tell you what, when Trump was in office, I had money in my pocket and I had food on the table. That's the Huey Long thing, right? You know Huey Long from Louisiana. I was going to say, we're going to have to sit down and have a conversation here about that a little bit later. But there really is this idea that Donald Trump came out and said, this stuff has not been working. And a lot of pundits have made the case. I know Kurt Schlichter on before. He's made it several times. Pragmatism has a place in politics. We don't like saying that because saying pragmatism has a place in politics means that sometimes Speaker Mike Johnson is right and the others who are more hardline on the ideologies, like me, are wrong because you have to get done what you got to get done. But there's also an element of pragmatism in politics that's like Donald Trump's pragmatism. He wants things to work. There's a degree where he doesn't really care how they work. He just wants them to work. And so if tariffs are the way to get that done, tariffs are going to be how it gets done. By the way, Tim Young is broadcasting over in the studio over there. We have a star-studded cast here at Heritage. I'm just a little shrimp in the pond here. But when I've listened to Tim and some of the other pundits discuss Donald Trump, I was talking to the guy who runs DC Drano yesterday evening. We were at the Power 30 Awards. And we were talking about pragmatism in politics. And this idea that Donald Trump is not treating the presidency, especially this election, as though he was trying to market a campaign, as though I was some kind of a focus group where someone's going, hey, would you like the new Yoplait yogurt containers to be circular or square? Because like that's how corporate marketing works, right? It's all based on seeking after the consumer. And what we saw Donald Trump doing in this particular election was driving forward a kind of return to what works instead of what I think the marketing team has decided somebody, there are Republican in consultancy groups in Chicago, for example. There's this guy out of Indiana, James Jefferson Shreve, and he ran for the mayor of Indianapolis, and he did a horrible job. Botched it. He literally flipped on like every position. He went from being like pro-life to saying, I would order the police not to investigate breaking Indiana's pro-life laws. And then he went from having like a decent rating with the NRA to saying, I would ask the Indiana state legislature to ban semi-automatic rifles, which is quite the flip. And part of that came from these Chicago consultancy groups who can look at the market data. And again, we talked before to Scott Rasmussen, right before we flipped over to the Trump inauguration speech. And I got to tell you, this age of treating the entire Republican Party, this entire Republican movement, or conservative movement, libertarian, whatever you want to call it, the right side of the aisle, as though they're a bunch of individual, like data functionary pieces to read and then create these algorithms for. That era is kind of over because it doesn't work. It doesn't function. And people don't support it. You come out and say, well, I mean, I know that you really would like to be able to afford groceries, and I'm sure you like that. But what we really need to consider, really need to think about it is, do Americans really care if Bud Light is airing trans commercials? And I hear Republican pundits write articles that complain about people concerned about cultural issues, that complain about people who don't like the grocery prices, who complain that people don't like being stepped on the world stage, who complain that people don't want to be in endless foreign wars building democracy instead of winning the war outright, like, again, Teddy Roosevelt. That age is over. And the reason that age is over is, I'll one-up it. There are two reasons that this particular age is over. Reason number one, that we're done with that era, is because we've reached the saturation point for social media hyper-corporate marketism. So when I was an administrator at IPS, I had a very great strategy. I can use corporate words in a dynamic way that introduces synergy and increases the trajectory of our goals and aims in the confluence of stated understandings of marketability. Now, if you understood what I meant there, I need you to text me and let me know, because I was completely making that up off the fly. I could use corporate words to kind of bull my way through the useless meetings that we were in. The problem is that after a while, if you were around someone enough so that you share an office with them, or in this case, if you're going to the grocery store every day, you're going to get gas every day, you don't want to walk down any street in an inner city anymore, you don't want to even be out in what are supposed to be like protected and safe areas of a city anymore, suddenly all those corporate words start to sound a little extra shallow. Suddenly they don't really come across as experts who know what's best for you, as the technocracy model is supposed to illustrate. All of a sudden, you start to feel like you've been scammed. Like Joel Osteen. When Joel Osteen gets up and says, it's what you've got to do to understand where you're going. And he doesn't cite scripture. He doesn't cite good doctrine. And instead, he fleeces his flock for lots of money, and then he gets off. Like megachurch pastors, they don't actually bring scripture forward, or a lot of Catholic priests that are more in it for the show than the Catholic priests who are more about their parish, and they're more about actually upholding church tradition. I'm trying to be fair to Protestants and Catholics here, the ones that are actually devoted to what they're doing. And the big fancy ones that are on TV, it ends up being a show. Politicians had the same problem. And Ted Cruz is a phenomenal voice on this kind of a thing. So is Mike Lee from Utah, by the way. That if you can't deliver, then after a while, I got to wonder, why are you my delivery service? If I'm ordering packages via FedEx, and they're showing up like that Rob Schneider SNL sketch, the one with the, like Swift or something. I forget the actual, a Jiffy. Like they're showing up and it's a box and it's all beaten up and messed up. FedEx is, delivering packages to my house every day that are torn up, they're the wrong order, they're garbage. I ain't ordering anymore. Case in point, we do not do Kroger order anymore at our house. The Kroger online delivery thing, it's awful. All of the produce is almost always rotten. They're saying that items aren't on the shelves that we then go into the store and find on the shelves. It's a horrible service. We're not using them anymore. That's how Americans are getting with the policy, because after the Cold War, and I know I've said this on the show quite a bit, that after the Cold War, we lived off of the fats of the victory of defeating communism and defeating fascism in the 19th century. So America could really do whatever it wanted to because there was no extra world actor that could actually infringe upon our national identity. And that apathy that came from being able to not care about politics, and you could just enjoy your sports and your entertainment and your food, the panem et circenses being the Latin, you didn't have to care. Well, that actually runs out. It turns out that just trusting a system to run on its own, eventually, if you don't check your car's oil, eventually the car breaks down. We saw this during COVID, right? People are like, well, the engine light will come on and then I'll know to change the oil. We treated our public school system that way. All of a sudden, around COVID, everyone sees smoke pouring out from under the hood of the engine. My kids can't read and they're talking about all this pronoun stuff and racial equity stuff. This is like 4th grade math. What's going on? They open up the hood and there's smoke pouring out of the engine. Like, why wasn't the check engine light on? You trusted this car to run by itself forever. It doesn't work like that. The American political system was not built to work like that. As Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it. As Thomas Jefferson said, every once in a while, the tree of liberty has to be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. That doesn't just mean a bloody war every once in a while. The blood here means the actual passionate lifeblood of a people. It is a marathon. We talked about that with Ron Coleman. Man, it's almost like I wrote this thing out before. I am eager to return to a place in this country over the next couple of years. I'm eager to return to a place in this country in the next couple of years where perhaps we might see the Republican Party kind of split into a few internal factions. You have Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in there with Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem, and it's going to get hotter than the 4th of July. You're going to have some ideological disagreements for your McOrder. It's going to be something special. Well, if you actually get enough of the moderate kind of Bill Clintonian 90s labor Democrats who've been brought over to the Republican side of the aisle, having conversations with the very last vestiges of the neocons who actually do want to do kind of corporate business in the way the neocons did, and then you bring the traditional conservatives and the libertarians into it, you actually get discourse and arguments on the ideas and actually go somewhere with them, which is what we're having right now. When you saw Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk debating H-1B visas amongst the rest of the right, it actually, we got to take a look. I learned things about the H-1B visa system, like which companies were using them and what kind of jobs they applied for, and how the H-1B visa system was not as profitable for the country as a system and not managed as well as the O-1 visa system, which is for like geniuses and really intelligent people. So I'm really confident, if for nothing else, about a broader dialogue while we get all of, like Trump said, it's the return of common sense. And that sounds like a cheap political line. Trump's not running for office anymore. Case in point, there's a Democrat who was a union Democrat who worked at who works on a factory floor that listens to the show. So he works at the Honda plant in Indianapolis. And we were chatting the other day. He and I used to be part of a club together, and we were talking a little bit about it. We were actually opposing, we both worked at the polls in the 2016 elections. I was the Republican judge. He was a Democrat judge at the time. Judge, just people staffing the polling place in the Church of the Nazarene in Middletown, Indiana. And he said, I am excited about the next couple of years. And hearing that from him, the kind of guy who would just like make kind of basic off-the-top excuses for why, oh, well, I'm a Democrat and actually all this is overblown and really they're just about unions and the worker and the average American and, you know, the Midwestern Democrat argument that we've heard for decades on end if you've ever spoken to a Midwestern Democrat who's above the age of 25. Under the age of 25, I don't think so. That's a different argument. That's a different bird. A non-binary bird at that. But this guy, I won't use his name out of respect for him because I didn't ask his permission to out him. He said he was excited for the next couple of years because he thought that we were returning to an era where the bleep that didn't work would be left alone. Think about that. An era, an administration where you don't have presidents flooding their social media accounts with pictures of rainbow flags and rainbows painted onto streets. That time and resources might actually be spent. Maybe an idea is tried and it doesn't work. Okay. I'm not expecting every single thing that Trump is getting ready to bring forward in this administration to be a slam dunk home run, works instantly, presto. But I tell you what, I'm looking forward to what common sense driven ideas are attempted, whether they be more populist or whether they be more traditionally conservative or whether they be more economically libertarian or even a little bit of corporatarian, whatever. As long as the ideas are made without me having to go, okay, well, we're now legally obligated to hear about the equitable ideas of this guy who is wearing a skirt. All right, thank you. And then he comes in and he's like, climate change really negatively impacts non-binary gay antelopes. And everyone looks around like, what does this have to do with the workers in North Dakota who are trying to build safer refineries? And we had a guest on the show recently who pointed out, you know, very clearly that it was wild to be in a position in this country, the present time, in which we had not built a refinery, like an actual new petroleum refinery. It was Scott Perry from Pennsylvania. We had him on just before the show, actually on Friday. He said, we haven't built a refinery in ages, like decades. And that is all kinds of wrong, because think about the advancements we have made in the manufacturing and processing of petroleum products. You want to talk about actually being more responsible for the environment? Build a new refinery that refines better and more efficiently than the one that was built in 52. Kind of a concept. And then there's amazing things happen. You know, you've got fracking that's going on in Pennsylvania. So what you do is you build the refinery in a Pennsylvania town that is easily accessible via pipelines or trucks or trains or whatever you're moving the fracked natural gas through to that area. And then it's amazing. All of these guys move into work at the refinery, and then you end up, those guys need to buy food. And so then you need employees to work at the food places. And so then if you need employees to work at the food places, those people need to go buy shoes and clothes. And then you have what is called a town created. It's not difficult to do this. I mean, this is, Caleb, do you play video games at all ever here and there? Yeah. So I don't know if you ever played a city builder game. So city builder games like SimCity, City Skylines have been around for a long time. They are an excellent method of teaching individuals how the economy is supposed to function by incentivizing supply and demand, by improving industry. The reason that games have technology trees where you research to unlock new technologies is because innate in every single person is the industrious spirit to build something ex nihilo, out of nothing. It is actually one of the aspects that the Creator God implanted in man, that we are creative. Not creative as in, yeah, just look in a room and I think of all the colors that I could paint on the wall. I'm not talking about like art creativity. I'm talking about the desire to create, to build, to grow. I mean, some of you that are listening to this, you feel that fire burning in your heart when Trump was talking about this enormous list of people from various points in American history, from policemen to pioneers, from steel workers to factory workers, from farmers to pharmacists. I mean, he's like going through this entire list that's very well recited. And there's this excitement for the Abrahamic dream of manifest destiny to take this wild landscape of this country and turn it into something that is for the betterment of everyone living within its borders. Because the true secret to this entire system is that when the United States has treated its industriousness, its creativity, its drive forward, not in this weird social progressivism, but in this dynamic of actually creating a society that goes as far as we can to make life as great as possible from the resource side, and then uphold a moral, Western, classic civilizational structure alongside of it, built on the classic Judeo-Christian ethic that has upheld the West for ages through the Christian faith. That is the best environment for man to succeed and thrive in. And the Soviet Union in the 1960s and 70s created this goofy narrative that American imperialism had somehow created these colonies of despair and horrific whatever. Whereas the American colonial empire that Teddy Roosevelt established ended up creating some of the greatest economic powerhouses that kicked the crap out of their British equivalents. I mean, I will remind you that for a long time, that though the British still owned Hong Kong, the United States took Japan and turned it from nothing into everything. We didn't have to do that, for the record. And that the United States system of governance and the system of cultural expansion is a wonderful thing. That is a common sense thing. And to have a president who, I don't even care if he pursues this to the end. I'm not saying that I want the president of the United States to annex Canada and also to annex all the way down through Panama so that it's the United States of North America, although I think that we have a moral right to do so. But this president is not scared of having those kinds of conversations. And that, just in and of itself, that those concepts that built this entire country, those concepts that made it flourish, those concepts that gave birth to people who would later give their lives for their persistence, that the blessing of Almighty God is something to be cherished. I'm beyond thankful to not see it desecrated from the podium of the president. By the way, none of that makes Trump superhuman. None of that makes Trump a religious figure. None of that makes me going, oh, thank God Trump is so XYZ. No. I'm not asking you to be better than the idea. I'm not asking you to be, Joseph Maroney grabbing the tablets and running down and saying, I have a message from the Lord. A little VeggieTales reference there that was mixed up with Mormonism. Whoops. I'm not asking for that. What I am asking for is that when those ideas are relevant to what's going on, the inauguration of a president, the loss of U.S. troops, especially on foreign soil, a horrible tragedy, like in New Orleans, or like the hurricanes with Milton and Helene, or the wildfires in California, or the arson fires in California, whichever they may be, or both. That when a president speaks to the American public, that those values which built and sustained this country and her people are held sacrosanct. And they're not tossed to the side for this progressive Wilsonian idea of bureaucratic fetishness. And that in and of itself is enough to make me genuinely thankful for today. And to hear that speech. Again, am I glad that, we have a president who's no longer, mentally decrepit and about to keel over? Absolutely. And am I thankful that Trump is going to be bringing back a lot of policies and that he was bold and brash about things? 100%. But the language that Trump used and how he gave them reverence is far more important to rebuilding the institutions that have lost all trust with the American people than anything else. Because now I believe that if this man appoints other guys who talk like that and actually showcase it, like Pete Hegseth described in his opening and closing statements, when Pete Hegseth tells me something and it's a hard to believe kind of a situation, and he says, look, here's what's going on. I know it looks like this. Here's the evidence. We're going to be as transparent as possible. We can't reveal everything to you for national security instances because someone might see this and use it against the United States, whatever. Then I'm more inclined to believe him. Because if you hold the values that I hold sacrosanct as a virtue worth protecting, then that creates an institution of trust that I can then allow you to do something on my behalf with my taxpayer dollars. And that's the idea. Thank you very much for joining us. The weather in D.C. is brisk and breezy, but I'm excited to say that here over at the Heritage Foundation, where we've been broadcasting from, a lot of encouraged spirits. For one, at seeing a president of the United States take power who does, by all intents and purposes, and shown through the fires of an attempted assassination, does genuinely care about this country and her people. But more so, that an era of extreme corruption through the Biden administration, through his bureaucratic heads and secretaries who did whatever they pleased, through his aides, which, again, according to a report by Speaker Johnson and several others, had basically shoved executive orders in front of an aged man, told him they were something else to get his signature so that those became executive orders on the books. That era is now over. The dawn is finally at hand. We did it. And I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in. This has been the 249th episode of the Tony Kinnett Cast. We will be back this evening on our standard broadcasting time and on our syndication network, radio and TV stations. Thank you. Big thanks to our friends also who helped us suspend the typical commercial clock today that allowed us to deliver a bit of longer content as well. It's always a joy to be with you. I am Tony Kinnett, investigative columnist over at the Daily Signal and host of, you guessed it, the Tony Kinnett Cast. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you real soon.